The Democrats are screwed. They won't admit it yet, but they know what is coming. It is a massive problem for them, and they have the same solution in 2020 as they did in 2016. Bernie Sanders' base hates the establishment, whether it is Jeb Bush or Hillary. New data shows that if he loses the primary, a huge percentage of his backers will support Trump, others will go to a third party. Without these voters, the Democrats can't win the general, and they will only vote for Bernie. But Bernie, being an old white guy, will never make it out of the primary, at least if this is any harbinger. From Fox News, 2020 presidential contender Bernie Sanders faced an aggressive and, at times, outwardly combative audience at the She the People forum devoted to women of color in Houston on Wednesday, as the self-described Democratic Socialist struggled to convince attendees of his commitment to minority and underprivileged communities. The tense moments underscored the challenges Sanders' campaign still faces despite its front-runner status. The 77-year-old Vermont senator, long a champion for progressive causes, has sought to win over voters who turned out in massive numbers to support former President Barack Obama. In a particularly striking moment, host Amy Allison asked Sanders what he would do to fight white supremacist violence. In response, Sanders launched into a familiar anecdote that, perhaps precisely because of its familiarity, seemed to crash and burn. I know I date myself a little bit here, but I actually was at the March on Washington with Drive. Martin Luther King back in 1963, Sanders began, as audible groans and jeers broke out at the auditorium at Texas Southern University. One person apparently shouted, "We know." And, Sanders continued, as he held his hand up to quiet the crowd and apparently to wag his finger, as somebody who actively supported Jesse Jackson's campaign, as one of the few white elected officials to do so in '88, I have dedicated my life to the fight against racism, and sexism, and discrimination of all forms. Sanders faced similar backlash when he responded to an audience question about white supremacy by discussing immigration and federal minimum wage, as well as his sweeping Medicare for All proposal. The audience loudly applauded when Allison reminded Sanders that the core of the question concerned violence against minorities. Separately, co-host Joy Reid asked Sanders how he would win over Hillary Clinton voters, including black women in particular. In response, Sanders trashed Trump as the most dangerous president in modern history, and generally called for unity among Democrats as well as social justice, racial justice, and environmental justice. That response immediately drew more hecklers, as Reid pressed, "Yeah, and for black women specifically? I'm sorry?" Sanders asked, as the jeers became louder. "For black women specifically," Reid reiterated. Sanders responded, "Black women will be an integral part of what our campaign, and what our administration is about." "Okay? And that means," the audience erupted with heckling for a few seconds, as Sanders tossed his arm up in the air in dismay and muttered, "Okay. Were you finished with your dash?" Allison asked when the crowd quieted. "Yeah," Sanders replied. "Let's block ads." "Why?"